Governor, when you look at some of the targeting that would probably lose in the long run, like the law firms, we didn't get an initial case because some of the first law firms settled. And that was the first news. Now I just quoted from a proceeding where judges seem very skeptical of government power being used to target firms this way. What does that tell you about the nature of the pushback? Because we've heard about picking the right battles and Democrats saying, well, are they only advocating for this or that detainee versus fighting everything because that's the only way you'll find out what sticks?
Look, what we've learned is that courage is contagious. Somebody's got to go first. And there is an overwhelming sentiment in this country that people are tired of Trump's chaos and corruption and increased costs. They just need a spark. And we're seeing these sparks now. And I have to tell you, the most heartening thing to me is in the last couple of weeks, and I've been banging the drum on this for several weeks now, of law firms are standing up and are surrounding Perkins Coie with a wall of resistance. Colleges are standing up. 150 colleges signed a letter the other day. My college, University of Washington Faculty Senate, just passed an initiative saying we're going to stand up in sort of a NATO Big Ten. So the Big Ten conference, we hope is going to be in a NATO-like all for one. And that's very important because if you just hunker down and try to think, I hope he doesn't notice I'm around, that doesn't work. Winston Churchill, when he was talking about the evils of Hitler, was talking about it's not a good strategy to feed the crocodile in hopes you'll be the last eaten. So I think people are figuring this out. They're getting to the bulwarks. Civil society is standing. And this is really important because we've got to make sure that civil society, all of our organizations, will stand behind the Supreme Court when it does rein this guy in, which is happening, and I believe will happen in spades coming up.
Yeah, and it happened at a 7-2 vote over the weekend, which is a big deal. This president is not Hitler, although Larry David, in a satirical piece in the Times, did explore how many dinners one could have with a dictator. Molly, you write about this, and I just liked your very clear turn of phrase that instead of liberals talking about responding to Trump and, look at what he's doing and rushing, you basically say, actually, the administration can't fight so many wars at once. The lesson from Harvard is be visible, loud, and stay fighting. That liberals or opponents or even people, nonpartisan people who protect democracy, have to also pick fights.
Right. And I think there's an argument, we were talking about this before, that Harvard is actually in a better spot than Columbia is, right? Because when you acquiesce, you become a captured institution. And when you become a captured institution, you have to make a deal with this administration. And we've seen just with the tariffs that this administration goes back and forth on deals. So Columbia is now trying to make a deal with the Trump administration, well as Harvard has the courts. And the courts are going, and what we've seen in the courts is, and we saw this with the law firms, the courts end up siding almost, not all the time, but mostly with the people who are suing the administration. So you'd be much better off with the courts than you might be trying to make a deal with this administration.
Right. And you're only going to find out then. I mean, I get why some of these institutions don't want to be the pointy edge of the spear. They might like to hide. As you said, that doesn't work. But if you actually challenge it, then you learn where the lines are. If you have to settle later because you lose the case, well, then at least you can tell your stakeholders, we tried. But the opposite's happening. Here's a report on that case I mentioned. The judge appears to incline to side against Trump and block the law firm targets. Judge Howell saying in the hearing the administration's efforts to target these firms merely for who they supported, and there's a right to counsel in this country, quote, echoed the repression of McCarthyism and the Red Scare era.
Two things. One, you got to understand, I'm an old lawyer. Judges are usually reserved and kind of benign in their language. These judges' hair are on fire about this insult on democracy, and they know where this can head of everybody's rights being threatened. That's number one. And from the individual, from the colleges and the law firms, if you watch crime drama, there's one rule. Blackmailers, extortionists always come back for more. And this guy's going to keep coming back for more until you stand up against him. So everybody needs to do everything, everywhere, all at once. You need to litigate. You shouldn't collapse for 1 second. There's no deal to be made with a voracious appetite like Donald Trump. And so you're starting to see people picking up with that message. And it's very heartening to me because there's a reason to believe we're going to lose this democracy if people don't do this. And it's not just Congress. It's colleges, chambers of commerce, law firms, accountants, every professional organization, the media.
Shout out to the media.
Well, we saw George
Some people
Clooney.
say they're the enemy of the people, but I'm not so sure.
No.
We saw George Clooney play last night. And
Oh, you did?
On the very night.
Talk about McCarthyism.
McCarthy.
Explain to people what play that is.
And management was pushing on Edward R. Murrow to give up and not go after McCarthy. That same day, the executive producer of 60 Minutes resigned because he's getting too much pressure from management.
Yeah.
Every organization in America today, every social organization, I believe, has some need and obligation to stand up against this guy.
Yeah, so Governor, let's dig into that because that's about free speech.
Yeah.
And a strange thing has happened on the internet where certain business people and propagandists found that free speech was a good talking point. So they took the talking point, not the substance.
Yes.
But you're talking about, and we might be covering this more this week, that 60 Minutes, a venerable institution, their executive producer, who is nonpartisan, got the track record, said the Trump pressure, which came up and over on the corporate side, attacked free speech. Now, I want to be clear. There's not an allegation of a law broken, right? Because the government didn't send the cops in or something. They didn't send the FBI in, right? But the free speech principles that journalists in 60 Minutes and others back were so compromised, says the 60 Minutes leader who resigned, by those Trump corporate efforts. So my question to you, as someone who's been a big Democrat, run a state, do Democrats need to get back on the free speech bandwagon? Have they almost lost the branding on this to business people?
You know, I'm whether you call it free speech or whether you say, look, we're paying our taxes, so there's one thing we ought to expect every president: just follow the damn law. Right. That's what our attorney general said. That's all we're asking here. That may resonate more. Follow the damn law, respect my rights, we follow the Constitution and your oath. Either you call it free speech or just quit abusing me as a totalitarian. Either one works for me. But the point is, this executive, the way our system is set up, they have so many levers if they want to be evil to pull, and they're pulling almost all of them.
Yeah.
Contracts, firing people.
Right, which is
cutting
big government
agencies.
abuse. Do you want big government in your campus?
You want big government. Listen,
in your boardroom, yeah.
If you're a conservative right now, if you're a true old-fashioned conservative, you ought to be going crazy what Trump is doing, because he is demonstrating how evil government could be to your citizens.
And that it's corrosive. We want a free society where people make up their own mind, whether that's in business, which is private commerce, or a campus, which is independent. So they're going against all that.